As you build a retirement plan for your client, there are dozens of variables to consider. When should they start their Social Security income? What will their monthly expenses be? What types of accounts should their savings be invested in, and how should the money be distributed across those accounts? How would a bear market affect the time the money lasts? Your job as the planner is to find a set of options that will result in an effective plan, one that protects the client's income for the life of the plan while meeting their income needs. There is no secret formula for defining an effective plan. Each client's situation is unique and requires analysis specific to that client. As you define a plan, you will try several sets of options to evaluate all the what-if situations. In OptiPlan, each set of options that you create is referred to as a scenario. You can create as many scenarios as you want in each plan, and then let your clients review the scenarios and select the one they are most comfortable with. One effective approach is to build the first scenario based on the client's current expectations for their retirement. Then build additional scenarios to demonstrate possible risks and safer, more effective scenarios. To work with the scenarios in a plan, go to the dashboard and click on either Work on one of my plans or select a plan from the recently modified plans list. Click on the Edit button for the desired plan, and the plan editing screen will open. On the left side of that screen, you'll see a list of the scenarios that have already been created for the plan. Click on a scenario name to open an outline of all the components included in the scenario. These components are referred to as elements. Click on the scenario name again to collapse the outline. Only one scenario can be expanded at a time. If you click on a closed scenario, the currently open scenario will collapse and the new one will be expanded. For each new plan you create, the first scenario is automatically created for you using a scenario template that you define. Watch the lesson on scenario templates for details on setting up your templates. You can add or remove elements as necessary and enter the options for each of the elements based on the information you have collected from your clients. Each scenario consists of a set of elements including Social Security options, income streams, monthly expense expectations, investment accounts, and bear market simulations. Watch the lesson on creating plan elements to learn the basics of working with these elements, or the lesson on the individual element types for detailed instructions on creating the elements. The first element in each scenario is the scenario definition element. To see the basic scenario options, click on the scenario definition element at the top of the scenario outline to load that element into the editor area. The scenario element is automatically loaded into the editor each time you expand a scenario. Begin by defining the scenario name. This should be a short, simple name conveying the features that distinguish it from the other scenarios. Typical examples are initial client version or added bear market simulation. Another approach is to name them based on their results, such as risky scenario, safe scenario, and safest scenario. The scenario description field is where you can enter a longer description of the scenario. In most cases, the description should highlight what makes this scenario different from the others. The Start Year parameter defines the calendar year where the OptiPlan calculations will begin. In most cases, this should be set to the current year, but if you're near the end of the year, you could start the scenario in the next year. OptiPlan does not currently support the option to do a partial year calculation, so the calculated values on the scenario reflect the yearly values on each anniversary date from when the plan was created. The inflation rate parameter is used to increase the expected monthly expenses each year of the scenario. Historically, the inflation rate in the US has averaged over 3% over the past 100 years. Typically, however, this value is set to 1 or 2%, but you should discuss this with your clients and agree on a number that they are comfortable with. Underestimating inflation could put your clients at significant risk financially. Each year of the scenario, the monthly expense estimates that you define will automatically increase by this percentage. The tax rate parameter is no longer used by OptiPlan, and this field can be ignored. OptiPlan now calculates the client's tax rate each year of the plan based on inputs you provide. These calculations are based on state and federal tax tables and several other tax law considerations. The resulting numbers are accurate enough for building a retirement plan, but OptiPlan should not be used as a replacement for tax calculation software or a professional tax advisor. See the lesson on tax calculations for more details. In special circumstances where a client's financial picture would result in a tax rate significantly different than the one calculated automatically, you can create tax overrides in specific years to control the tax rate manually. Watch the lesson on adjustments for more details. If your scenario will include stock accounts, it is common for these accounts to include a certain percentage of the balance in non-stock investments, such as bonds. Enter the expected rate of return for these non-stock investments in the bond rate of return field. During a bear market simulation, this rate will be applied to the non-stock portion of each account and to the entire account in months when a stop loss is in effect. Another important factor in determining the effectiveness of the retirement plan is the life expectancy of your clients. We suggest that you start with life expectancies based on actuarial tables. These can be found by searching the internet for life expectancy calculator. But your clients will probably ask, what if I live longer or pass away earlier? Enter the life expectancies in the end of life fields. You can vary this parameter with each scenario to see the effect that a longer or shorter lifetime will have on the success of the plan. If your plan covers a client couple, be sure to enter the life expectancy for both clients. Once you have defined all these basic options for the scenario, you can turn your attention to the other scenario elements. Of course, you can always return to the scenario definition to make changes to the scenario options. Once the first scenario has been configured, each additional scenario for the plan will be created by copying one of the other scenarios that you've already created in the plan. To create a copy of the scenario, expand the scenario and make sure the scenario element is loaded into the editor. Then click on the Copy button at the top of the editor. The currently loaded scenario will be copied, and the new copy will be added to the plan and loaded into the editor. You may make as many additional scenarios as you need. For each scenario you create, you can examine the year-by-year calculations that OptiPlan performs based on the elements defined in the scenario. To view the calculations, load the scenario element into the editor and click the Calculations button at the top of the editing area. OptiPlan will perform a quick validation on all the elements and the options that you have entered. If this validation identifies any critical errors that prevent the calculations from being completed, a summary of both critical and non-critical errors will be displayed. Switch back to the editor and make the necessary corrections. When you've made the corrections, click on the Calculations button again. If all the critical errors have been corrected, the Calculations grid will appear in a pop-up window for you to examine. Watch the Reviewing the Calculations tutorial for a detailed explanation of the Calculations grid. When you are finished reviewing the grid, click the Close button to return to the scenario you were editing. To validate the scenario element settings without running the calculations, click the Validate button to run the validation and open the Errors page. This is useful when there are only non-critical errors, because the pre-calculation validation won't show the Errors page again unless there are critical errors. You can also display the results of all the scenarios in the plan graphically to make it easier to compare them. Click on the Graph button in the main title bar to open the plan graph. All the scenarios in the plan are shown in the graph, with the scenarios listed below the graph. Scenarios can be temporarily removed from the graph by clicking the Hide button next to the scenario name, or added back to the graph by clicking the Show button. The scenario list also displays the color of the scenario to help identify each scenario line on the graph, and the ending balance for each scenario. If a scenario includes a bear market, the time during the bear market will appear as a dashed line on the curve. When the plan graph is created, all the scenarios in the plan will be included in the graph. You can use the Graph Sequence option in the scenario definition to find the order in which the scenarios are listed. If this field is not filled, the scenarios will be listed from the highest ending balance to the lowest. To exclude a scenario from the graph, go to the scenario definition element and set the graph sequence to 0. This will allow you to create a large number of scenarios to evaluate while only showing the best scenarios on the graph. To delete a scenario from the plan, load the scenario definition element into the editor, then click on the trash can button. OptiPlan will ask you to confirm the deletion, then delete the selected plan. Exercise caution when deleting scenarios because once a scenario is deleted, there's no way to undelete it. Finally, to see a summary of all the elements in the plan and all the element settings, select the scenario definition element and click on the Summary button. The summary will open in a new window with a table of information for each element type. This summary is a convenient way to review a scenario or discuss it with your clients.